Yes. Okay, I'm just trying to connect to the Zoom and I'll be ready. I don't know. It's not gonna work for me. So, okay. If everyone will take a seat, we'll get started here.
Thank you.
That's fine. That's good, Senator. Thank you. Good morning. This is Monday, November 20th, 1983. My name is Michael Linder. I'm co-chair of the Legislative Committee, and I call this meeting of the Kane County Board's Legislative Committee to order. Very first, we want to welcome Senator Don DeWitt, who is being greeted by Ms. Bates right now. Okay. Okay, so welcome, Senator. Would you call the roll, please?
Bates. Oh,
Bates, stay here.
Doherty.
Mr. Doherty, you're online? Not yet, at least.
Molina.
Molina present remotely.
Silva.
Welcome. I see Doherty is online. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Strathman.
Sorry, technical, I'm here.
Gotcha.
I got you. Strathman. Yes. Gums. And Linder.
Linder here. Thank you. We have remote requests from Ms. Molina and Mr. Doherty. Without objection, we'll allow them into the meeting. Thank you. Need a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of October 18th, 2023.
So moved. Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Strathman.
Unanimous consent.
Ms. Strathman asked for unanimous consent. Is there an objection? Okay, so the minutes are ready for public comment. Is there any public comment online? I don't see any, and no one in the room, so we'll move right on to new business and a little bit of a legislative update from.
Well, sorry, I'm not prepared. The legislative update was included in your packet. We've been getting a lot of information from our lobbyist group, and hopefully you all read that. We do have some legislative priorities that we've identified, and we're getting those compiled together for the January session. That's all I got for now.
Then we have a specific update from Senator DeWitt on the broadband issue. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be back on home ice this afternoon.
Senator, if you don't mind, can you get a little closer to the mic?
I sure can. Is that better? Oh, there we go. Thank you. My pleasure to be back on home ice here in Geneva, Kane County this afternoon. I have prepared about a 3-item agenda list here that I'd like to walk through quickly. I know you have a lot going on this afternoon.
Okay.
But first of all, I just wanted to start out with veto session, which just got finished in Springfield the third week of October, and then the first full week of November. I'm disappointed to say we really didn't get a whole lot done. There was an awful lot of legislation that never got called. But what I would share with you is 2 issues that probably took up the vast majority of our time while we were down there. One, depending on your perspective, not so good news, and the other one probably good news for the state as a whole. Some of you may have read that the Invest in Kids program sunset was not extended. That program will go away effective January 1st of 2024. Approximately 9,000 children within the state of Illinois, almost 58% of them minorities of either African American or Latino descent, took advantage of that program to work themselves into schools that they and their parents felt were probably better educational opportunities. So the opponents of that legislation felt strongly that that $75 million that's invested into that program every year could probably be spent better going directly into the public transportation system. A lot of the proponents of removing the sunset, we hung our hats on the fact that education funding, which is in the vicinity of $20 billion in the state of Illinois these days, has risen by about 10% since EBF, or equality-based funding, was initiated back in 2018. So like any piece of legislation in Springfield, there's good pieces and bad pieces. I know there were some Democrats on the other side of the aisle that felt this program should be extended. Unfortunately, the bill never got called. So that'll be something that I'm sure we'll have continued discussion when the new session starts in January. The other piece of legislation that did get approved was the nuclear ban, that a bill that came out of session on a bipartisan basis last spring, and the governor vetoed it for very specific reasons. He vetoed it because he felt there were not enough parameters on what type of reactors could be built. And frankly, the way the bill had been written, there was nothing that could have prevented another Byron, Illinois from being constructed, a huge megawatt facility. So my colleague, Senator Resinata Morris, went back to work, modified the bill, filed some amendments, and on a bipartisan basis with Lance Yednock out of Ottawa in the House sponsoring on his side of the building, they were able to get that done. The newer technology for nuclear, if you think of the type of nuclear reactors that are powering aircraft carriers or submarines or destroyers, naval vessels that protect our shores, this is the kind of technology that we're talking about seeing in the very near future. It's very possible that Kane County or the city of Geneva or the city of St. Charles someday may have their very own nuclear reactor producing electricity for their respective communities. So it's 6 to 8 years for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to approve the construction of these types of devices. But as we all know, the technology already exists. So I think that was a good piece of legislation. Nuclear is still a significant component of the state of Illinois' future for energy production and electricity production. So happy to see that passed, and we should be seeing some activity down the road here in the very near future. 3 or 4 pieces of legislative interest. I know one of the issues that many of us here in the meeting today, and a bill that I've had the opportunity to work with your member Mo Iqbal on, Senate Bill 2587. I think you've all received a copy of it today. Back in the early 2000s, when the broadband industry was really starting to come to fruition, most of the major carriers like, and I'm not casting aspersions by any stretch, but people like AT&T and Comcast, some of the larger providers of broadband services actually had restrictions written into state statute that would limit owners of those broadband systems, which came out to include fiber optic systems, from leasing them, creating competitiveness against their provided services. So late last spring, I filed Senate Bill 2587, which removes that prohibition for government entities to be able to lease access to their privately owned fiber optic systems. I have spoken to the major broadband carriers because there's a limitation that would not allow anyone having access to this line from reselling that service to anyone. They would actually have to file for a transmission license, which I think will be the ICC's control mechanism, how they prevent that from happening. That's the only restriction they've asked for, which we wrote into the which we wrote into the legislation. So it will still allow not-for-profit organizations like school systems, school districts and hospitals, medical facilities, things like that, to be able to have access to this system. So like I said, I've not heard any significant opposition at this point. It's something that I have, it's one of the bills I have on the top of my priority list in the upcoming session. And I hope to have support from those various agencies and industries with this legislation moving forward. A couple of other pieces, Senate Bill 1150, Amendment 1, with the infamous mechanisms of sliding new legislation into existing bills, known as a shell bill, removes the 1% grocery tax across the state. Some of you may recall back during the last election cycle, the governor suspended the sales tax on groceries, prescription drugs, and there was even a suspension of sales tax during back-to-school products. We think that some of that should be made permanent. It doesn't sound like a lot of money. It's $1 on $100, but when some families like mine are spending, $700 a month on groceries, it starts to add up. Statewide, the number's a little scary. It's almost $300 million in lost revenue. One of the concerns that the governor expressed to me, he actually doesn't really have any major issues with this bill, but he called me over the summer. Most of that 1% sales tax goes to local governments. And his question was, how are you going to backfill it? I didn't hesitate with an answer. Governor, you're already collecting and sweeping about 40% of the local government distributive fund that these local governments are already paying the state of Illinois every month. Why don't you just give them a little bit more of their own damn money back? And there was a pause at the end of the phone, and he said, that's an interesting concept. So I took that to mean it might make some sense. It might be something he won't have an issue with. And again, we did not get to talk about that legislation in veto session, but again, it's on that list of priorities I intend to continue to work on in the spring. Finally, just last Thursday, I filed Senate Bill 2646. As many of you know, January 1st, 2024, there's a new Paid Leave Act going into effect that will require every employer in the state of Illinois to provide up to 40 hours of paid unrestricted leave to every employee within their organization. There was some language in the existing bill that provided for municipalities and local governments who may already have paid leave language in their statutes. They would be exempted from this new legislation on January 1st. And just to give you an example, I'm going to use my hometown city of St. Charles as an example. The city of St. Charles already offers paid leave through their employees manual, and they also provide paid leave through their collective bargaining agreements with the 6 bargaining groups that they do business with. All they would need to do was make that statutory, and technically it would exempt them from this new state language going into effect on the 1st of the year. We are, I know most of the COGs, Metro West Council of Government, DuPage mayors and managers are all advising municipalities to get their own legal counsel with regards to how they implement this. But a lot of municipalities have taken advantage of this, and I don't even want to call it a loophole, but this language in the bill that would allow them to become exempted from the legislation on January 1st.
May I stop you there for a second?
Certainly.
You're saying that this is legislation that's proposed at this point.
The bill itself passed last spring. The Paid Leave Act passed in the spring.
But the exemption for local governments.
The exemption is in the existing bill that was approved last spring.
Okay.
But again, I'm cautioning every municipality or any unit of government. Yeah.
Okay. We did that last week.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So it's
Wonderful.
That's why I was hoping it wasn't something that we weren't ready for yet.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, 2646 in conjunction with the Illinois Municipal League I went ahead and filed a bill that would exempt municipalities, counties, townships, and forest preserve districts from the Paid Leave Act. It would out and out exempt them from the entire legislation. Most of the concerns that have been expressed to me have been public safety related. I mean, you can imagine a whole shift of a police department or a forest preserve district staff deciding to catch the White Sox game, on Wednesday night, and they all just peel off. According to the terms of the legislation, all they've got to do is say, I'm not coming in.
Snowplow drivers on
There
Christmas
you
Eve.
go. Exactly right. So that's what kind of driving this particular bill. And like I said, it was filed last Thursday. It'll probably be read in, if there's not a perfunctory session between now and January 15th, it'll be read into the record then. So we're going to continue to work on that. In the upcoming session, to wrap it up here for you, Chairman, in the upcoming session, one of the things we're very concerned about, and I know Madam Chair Perogue has been involved in, is a new report being issued by CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Alliance for Planning, called the PART Report, P-A-R-T, stands for Plan of Action for Regional Transportation. As many of you know, the service boards have been making a lot of noise about the fact that the federal dollars that they were awarded over the last 3 years are starting to wind down. They are looking at about a $700 million fiscal cliff in 26, 27. And they are looking to make some changes with regards to revenue enhancements to try to find a way to backfill what they see as a significant financial problem. Some of those suggestions in the report include an increase in the existing 0.75% RTA sales tax, a broadening of the tax base, broadening sales taxes to professional services and legal services. There's discussion about tapping tollway revenue, obviously taking tollway revenue to help pay for mass transit. The plan being those revenues would maybe help take cars off the roadways. And another segment of that revenue enhancement process is something I'm working on, which would be to open up video gaming in the city of Chicago. Currently, there's no video in the city of Chicago. They've Mayor Emanuel, Mayor Daley, Mayor Lightfoot. I think they were all holding out for that big prized downtown casino, which they now have. There's a formula that's been kicked around between myself, Representative Cam Buckner, and Representative Mary Beth Canty from Arlington Heights, who's a former RTA member like I am, to basically open up video gaming to the city of Chicago. And like in the Rebuild Illinois program, where the increase in motor fuel tax was lockboxed into transportation-related issues, we would probably look into the same type of mechanism with video gaming in Chicago. Potentially, it could generate up to $100 million a year, which is a significant chunk of that $600 million that they're looking at over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. So, and finally, and I think most importantly in this PART report, is the governance piece. There's discussion about eliminating the 3 service boards, Metra, CTA, and PACE, and rolling them all into a hybrid RTA board, which would have representation of each of those service boards amongst this new reconstituted RTA oversight board. And I think that's really going to be where the rubber meets the road, because no one's talking yet about who will be included on this new board, who will be making the appointments. Will county board chairmen still be allowed to make the RTA, Metra, PACE appointments to this body? One of the major concerns I have is debt service. The CTA's in the hole almost $5 billion right now. Their pension's only funded at a 50% level. I'm sure they would like nothing more than to have complete control of the entire operation taken over by a broader base of the 6 county membership of the RTA region. So I'm very concerned about this particular move. I believe being driven from our friends in Cook County. I got the invitation for the rollout of this report next week. And as you can imagine, Chairman Tony Preckwinkle will be the anchor speaker for the introduction. So we're going to watch this one very carefully. I know I have friends on the other side of the aisle here in the suburbs equally concerned about what this may mean for regional transportation. Clearly, that model has changed. Back in its heyday, the metropolitan region, the RTA region, was carrying close to 2 million people a day. They're just at about 50% right now, post-pandemic. I think the business model has changed. Less and less people are going downtown every day. A lot more people working at home. They're seeing fluctuations. Some days are busier than others. It seems like the weekend traffic in and out of the metropolitan area seems to have picked up the quickest. But Monday, Friday traffic is significant. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's flat. Clearly, it's a different model that the pandemic has created in mass transit in the metropolitan region, and we're going to keep an eye on this one very carefully. So, sure, thank you. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to pause and happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Sure, Ms. Bates, question?
Am I on? Now I am. So what do you think of this merging of the three transportation departments into one? Is this a good idea?
I think it could be.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think it could be a good idea. I think most critics of the existing model see, 20, 25, 30 people who comprise these three boards drawing minimal salaries as a way to save money. The RTA region their budget's like $3.5 billion a year. So for them to be looking at saving $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 just in administrative costs, to have those people coming into each of their respective boards on a regular basis, if they're looking to save money, there are much better ways to do it.
I was hoping it was to work together.
Well, that too, that too, and that's some of the things that make sense. I think there are some of the service boards, and I won't name names, but I think some of the boards have been very responsible with regards to their fiscal management. If they're passing budgets on an annual basis with increases, they're at least manipulating their fare structure to be able to compensate for those increases. There are some of the agencies that never do that. Some of these agencies haven't had rate increases in 2 or 3 years. It's not fair to the rest of the region when, there's such a significant split regarding who gets most of the revenue in this RTA system and which ones get the least amount. So
Okay.
are there benefits to speaking in one larger voice? Mrs. Bates, I absolutely.
Good.
But how that gets structured and who gets to be the voices of that process is what we want to keep a real close eye on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Other questions for the senator? Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Linder. Want to just respond to Ms. Bates's comments is that the counties comprise a larger degree of the population than Cook County. So we are a growth county. Our fellow counties are also growth counties. The RTA will also be increasing into other counties within Illinois, Northern Illinois. And if we are reduced in not having a strong voice, a regional voice at that table, we do know, and I'm a proponent of Chicago, born there, have a dear love for the city of Chicago and Cook County, but nonetheless, they will absolutely dominate this conversation. And that conversation cannot be dominated. We have to have it shared, which is one of the issues that my consideration is why not supporting that merger. The fiscal house has got to be brought together first, and then after the fiscal house is managed, then we can talk about regional partnerships. But the service boards already have a great relationship, working relationship with each other. And I have to say that I don't think any of our board members want to assume the debt and fiscal issues that the city of Chicago has with their mass transit.
Just to add to that very quick story, when I first came to the RTA board, when I first came to the RTA board in 2013, after I came out of the mayor's office in St. Charles, the very first meeting I attended as a new board member representing Kane County were discussions about starting to set up public hearings about stopping service within the entire RTA because none of the service boards can come to an agreement on a budget. We had a change of leadership. Kirk Dillard came in as the new chairman. He brought in a new executive director. And then 6 months, they had the place turned around, took care of the issues that needed to be dealt with. And it wasn't a year later when they all showed up at the annual budget meeting singing campfire songs about how well everyone was getting along. Everyone had reached a peaceful level of operation. And it was almost in a year for a process like that to take place. I still applaud Chairman Dillard for having been able to do that. So everyone needs to work together within this organization. There's millions of people that count on mass transit every day, and we have to be very careful.
And it's good for the environment too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Senator, I'm going to take you back. You know, you and I both grew up in a small town called St. Charles. And you're a few years younger than me, but when I was 10 or 11 years old, I lived on 7th Street. We walked down to 3rd Street, catch an Aurora Elgin bus.
Yeah.
We go to Aurora. We could shop downtown Aurora. Today, you wouldn't send your 10-year-old to a place by yourself, but we did then. Or we go to the YMCA to swim, take the bus home. Today, the bus service that we have is less than that. It runs Randall Road to 38 and then stops at the train station, and you would switch buses. It'd probably be an hour-and-a-half trip or something, and there are only like 4 or 5 buses a day. One of our big problems in terms of the environment is all the cars that we're running around. And it's going to be a long time before we get all off of fossil fuels, if ever. It would be great if we could. But what are we going to do to make it possible for a guy who lives on 12th Street in St. Charles to use mass transit to get someplace? There's been no real consideration to that little micro piece that I see.
Yeah, it's a great point, Chairman. At the RTA, they call that the last mile. Yeah. That last little stretch of the trip to either get someone to the metro station or get someone to a central bus distribution system. It's been discussed for years. They've talked about partnerships with Uber and Lyft to provide these services for people. It remains one of the big challenges within the RTA region of getting people that last mile to the end of their destination.
Yeah,
And Pace Bus, unfortunately, Pace probably gets the least amount of money. Oh, I know for a fact they get the least amount of money than any other service board within the RTA region. And they are the ones that have really been having to manage their service structure the harshest, I would say. They've limited some service. They've reduced some service. A lot of Pace buses go down the street without very many people on them. But that required transportation is still important to a lot of people here in the western suburbs.
and in my mind, the turnaround would be if it became incredibly efficient,
Mhm.
there would be families who could give up the second car or the third car. And we would have public support for that. The transition to get there is tough.
I agree. Jeff Schilke is our chairman on the PACE board. He does a great job representing our interests here in the suburbs. And I'll next time I see Jeff, I'll bring this up to him and let them know we had this
I've mentioned
conversation.
it to him
Chairman.
before too, so. it's
Yeah,
good.
sure.
And I'm going to hog questions here. I'm going to ask one more. We're going to go back to the fiber bill.
Sure.
You mentioned that we'd be able to provide services to nonprofits, hospitals. Would we be able to provide services to a for-profit company that simply wanted to get data from one place to another, not selling it off to people or anything, just trying to get data from maybe
Sure.
from
No,
between two data centers, for
Fair
instance?
question. And the answer to that question is yes. I guess I took the nonprofit angle
Sure.
just from the standpoint that that was the original intention of why this system went in to begin with up and down Randall Road and through the rest of the infrastructure. As long as anybody you are leasing access to this line to does not resell access to that same line, I think everything will be square.
Are there people we should be contacting and talking to push this bill, or is it premature to do that?
I've actually already had a conversation with your lobby organization in Springfield about this legislation.
Good.
And I know Mr. Sherwood quite well. We've done a lot of work on a lot of pieces of legislation. He's aware this is a priority for the county. And it's an organization like his that can really help kind of put the word out, not only to the industry, but other legislators who will need support from to get this done. So.
Good, thank you.
But-
Any other questions for the senator? Well, Senator, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Hope we can do it again sometime soon.
I would love to
Yeah.
come back.
Good, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
Gov-
Thank you all.
Excuse me, Ms. Gumbs.
I just want to thank you very much for showing up. We played a little email tag there or something, so
Okay.
I just want to say thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Ms. It's my pleasure. Happy to come back.
Always open invitation, so.
Oh, happy to come back anytime. Thank you all very much.
Ms. Bates, one more.
Thank you for coming and
Thank
giving
you.
us all these information that we need.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right. Moving on. Okay, we're down to a resolution, amending resolution 23-206 to adopt a new process for approving lobbyist consultant invoices. Is there someone move
Miss,
that?
yes, so I would move the original resolution and ask for a second.
Bates seconds.
Mr. Chair, Gums,
Yes.
I would motion and ask for a second to substitute the resolution that is placed in front of you and also emailed to those individuals that are online for the one that was in the packet.
Can you point out the differences for us?
If I get a second.
Is there a second to that?
Oh, second.
Okay. Any discussion on substituting one for the other? I think not. So roll call on substituting.
Oh, I need my answer.
What was your answer?
What's different here? What was the
So we had
difference?
a couple of tweaks that were requested from our finance director and our auditor. Just cleaning up some of the language in the process
Okay.
and how it was handled. So we
So I
accommodated,
read this a week ago. Is it different?
yes, it is slightly different just to accommodate the request from our finance and our auditor.
Okay, thank you.
And again, it went through the state's attorney's office and it was hot it was hot in the hand when you got it. So
Okay. All right.
All right.
Your motion?
Ever,
Gums moved, I seconded for the amendment.
all right, so we're substituting the new resolution. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Bates,
Bates, yes.
Doherty,
Yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Strathman. Yeah, Gums,
Gums, yes.
Linder,
Linda, yes.
Now do we have to vote again?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Shut my microphone off because it was making noise. Ms. Gumbs, you want to kind of walk us through this, tell us what it's about, and then we'll.
Yeah,
for
so
discussion.
this resolution is just cleaning up some language in the process. Also, I was emailed that there is a Scribner's error. It was on the page here. It says passed by the county board on, it should be December 12th, not the 14th. If that's acceptable. This is just streamlining the process so that the invoices come to the legislative committee as we had spoke about, and then it will be processed as per the normal through the normal resources.
Discussion? Mr. Deppie?
I totally don't understand this. I don't think this is streamlining anything. I just think this is a crazy move to take away the normal approval process because you don't like the way it's happening. So I'd like to address the fact that this is happening because you want to personally approve this and take it away from the process. Why is that? Is there bills that aren't being paid? Are there procedures or questions that aren't happening? Because I've looked into the process and I can tell you that bills were held up because this organization did not live up to the contract in providing the proper information to get their invoices paid. I've got some examples or a couple of slides that I sent to Blair. Can I call up the first slide?
Please do.
Go down to the yellow part. There we go. Down there in the yellow part is the information that in the contract that they agreed to provide. And I'll just talk about it, is that the monthly invoice will also include, or that the consultant will submit to the county an itemized monthly invoice reflecting the work completed within the preceding calendar month and the time spent thereon. So the first invoice that they sent was, can you go to example 2? It was a $10,000 invoice for services rendered. It took 2 attempts with the finance department and the people approving this to finally get the detail that they submitted, which was finally approved on November 6th. And if you'll go on to page 3, you'll see the details that they submitted. So there's nothing wrong with the current process, except you don't seem to like it. Now, I would suggest that it would be really appropriate for this committee to approve these invoices just the same way that the ARPA committee has been approving the invoices. They get the invoices in advance. They then go over them with the ARPA committee. Then it finishes the rest of the regular process. But I'm certainly disturbed with this particular consulting firm. They've certainly underimpressed me the first couple of months. 2 months ago, I made it very plain that there was something that I was interested in. That was raising the limit associated with the senior tax freeze. Last month, Ms. Gumbs had to make a phone call after the meeting and then give me a verbal report. This month, there's a few bills that are listed. You would think in the matter of 2 months, I would have at least received an email or a phone call about it. So they certainly are not impressing me, and I don't think they're impressing anybody else. And I think this is just a poor move at the fact that you don't particularly like the fact that your invoices aren't just flying through without the proper documentation. So,
Ms. Gumbs, do you want to respond to that, or I will?
Well, I can respond and say that Mr. Tepe was notified about an update from the lobbyists by myself. But other than that, I have nothing further.
Yeah, the original process didn't bring those invoices past us at all. We're the committee that's working with the lobbyists.
this process changes the approval process completely. And there's no reason why you can't follow again the same way the ARPA committee did.
But the ARPA committee sees the invoices. Yeah, all right. Other discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm always worried about things that change the big picture of things. And I think sometimes I worry about who will follow in the footsteps of us in this process. And that worries me. I would rather have it be the same throughout all our committees. And this seems to be changing that process. Is that correct?
Ms. Gums?
This is it does not change the process in every circumstance. In some, perhaps. So the answer to that is, in some situations, yes. And this will be changing that process. You are correct.
So you said only sometimes so?
Correct.
And what would the difference be?
Well, in this circumstance, there were some obstacles and we had to navigate that very gently. I should be addressing the chair, sorry. We had to navigate that gently because we're working with an organization and there was some hiccups in their invoice. I will concede to that, Mr. Tepe. It was talked through and worked through with ourselves and also the state's attorney's office. There was a summary invoice that was acceptable through our state's attorney's office. They said that was completely sufficient for the submission. And then they were requested to document further details that would impede their proprietary and trade information, and that was not appropriate.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I think it is good that the second invoice, I agree that they should not have to give up their trade secrets or who specifically, but I like the idea of how many hours they worked on this particular issue. I think that's good.
And
for the
that's how it's
committee.
working now.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's really good for the committee to know that so that you can bring it to us so we can take it out. I think I like that a lot rather than just the first one. But I also understand that we're in transition with this. You know, you are working very hard to make the legislative committee something it hasn't been in the past. And I understand that. And transitions are tough sometimes.
And as I read the original, or the current situation, there was no requirement that those bills come past the committee at all. Am I right?
Well, that's I don't know if that's the case, but to your point, or to Ms. Strathman's point, the agreed upon summary invoices are now sufficient per our state's attorney through much discussion and collaboration with the organization. And that will be brought to this committee
So that'll be going forward like that.
from now on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I like that a lot. What I'm not so convinced of is that if we're changing this process from what other committees do, that we should do that. That's where I'm a little confused on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Bites.
do we understand? I don't know exactly how all the other committees work. So it's hard for me to say whether we're changing this from standard operating procedure or not. But what I read here, I think the crux of the matter is McGuire Consulting reports to the legislative committee. The legislative committee chairs should be provided with the invoices from McGuire Consulting, and those legislative committee chairs should review and approve such invoices for payment processing by the finance department. I can't imagine how it could be any simpler. I think this is simple, straightforward. We get the bill, we look at it, we hand it off to finance and it gets paid. I think this is trying to take any steps out of the process that could delay the payment of the invoices.
Just for
Ms.
clarification,
Gums.
It will go through the normal process, but that includes the auditor and the finance department and all of those things, just to be clear. So
And
everything else is the same. It's just the origin of where where the invoices are coming.
I
That's it.
think I think this is fine. And, oh, Mr. Chairman, and I'd also like to ask my colleague, Mr. Tepe, not to jump in with the roaring voice. It doesn't do anybody any good to roar. Thank you.
Mr. Tepe.
Mr. Chair, this is not a normal process, okay? There's no other committee that I know of that approves the invoices and then they're immediately paid. This is a total exception and it's being done for this one vendor. Give me another example of that.
That's not what this does. This goes through the process just like everything else. The only thing that this does is change the origin of where the invoices are coming. It does not do what you suggest, sir.
Call the question.
Is there a need to call or are we ready to vote?
Melina has her hand up.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ms. Pauline.
Ms. Molina,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I missed your hand up.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. I guess my bigger question is the contract we signed pretty much indicated that it was a flat $10,000 a month fee, regardless of the work, which we'd like to see them work every month. But I don't know if the State's Attorney, Assistant State's Attorney Frank can help me with that, but it pretty much obligates us to pay $10,000 a month. So I'm all for the transparency and seeing, you know, how many hours are worked. And I think that needs to come to our committee because in the future, it's important for us to know what those $10,000 are getting us, not just in hours worked, but, you know, the lobbyists work all kinds of things. So I think it's important to generate that data and for it to come to our committee. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Mr. Frank, you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Molina is correct. There's basically the requirement on our side is a flat fee. The requirement on their side is a basic outline of what they've done in that month. We were asked to look at an earlier bill that did include some directives of the things that they did. It's basically in the form of a kind of a basic spreadsheet. That information was deemed to be sufficient pursuant to what the terms of the contract are. And so to answer the question, I think that that's what they're currently providing is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Now may I call the question?
May we hear from the auditor?
Go ahead.
So just for clarification, we require more information. The state's attorney might say that that's acceptable based on the $10,000, but we still require additional supporting documentation to make the approvals, as I'm the one that makes the recommendation for approval, and then the county board is the one that votes upon it. So it's my determination on whether or not we have enough supporting documentation.
And what is your opinion?
No, that's why we added your language.
And then,
Yes, but through the conversation that you're having, the conversation that's going on now, what I'm hearing is that the state's attorney has deemed this enough information. But unfortunately, that's my determination.
well, okay, and that's something that if there ends up being a bill that you don't think is sufficient, you and the state's attorney will work on that with us to resolve it, see whether there's something more we need or see if we need to change something around. But Mr. Frank has his hand up again.
Oh, I think we need to hear more from Ms. Whiteman.
Yes, so when it comes to the invoices, there's ways that the departments that transmit those invoices to us, they can redact additional information that's not made public, but it still would be our determination that this was for business purpose. So that, yeah.
Mr. Frank, your hand is up again.
Yes, thank you. Our determination is strictly based on the contract and the language that was agreed to. So I'm not trying to step on the auditor's toes with this analysis. The analysis is strictly what is required under the contract. If there are additional things that we need, we could probably talk with them, but the contract that was signed between McGuire Woods and the county only requires what I've outlined. But I'm happy to talk with the auditor about this. Like I said, I don't put my thumb on the scale for policy one way or the other. This is really just a question of contract interpretation. But there's a secondary contract, which I understand Ms. Wigman is alluding to, which is the requirements for her office. So I'm happy to work with her if she'd like. But to answer the specific question of have they provided us enough information pursuant to the contract we signed with them, the answer is yes.
I'm resisting the urge to speak to her against a motion because the chair is not supposed to do that. But Ms. Bates has asked us to call the question. So is there any objection to taking a vote? Do we need to vote on the call? No. Seeing none, we'll call roll.
Bates,
Bates, yes.
Doherty,
Doherty, yes.
Molina,
Molina, yes.
Silva,
Silva, yes.
Stratman,
Strathman, no.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Linder,
Linder, yes. Passes. Okay. Old business,
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
may I bring up some new business?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this is where I'm supposed to do this. If not, stop me. But I sent an email to all the members of this committee on a legislative matter that I'm seeking help with. I sent this on Saturday morning. The subject is the need for funding for a sound barrier wall along Orchard Road in Aurora. And this is an issue that Mr. Rickart's been helping me with for a long time, and other people in Aurora. Ken Schroff is their chief engineer. Carl Franco is the alderman, and other neighbors in the area. And so I don't know, do you want me to explain this more or just submit it as?
In the short order, who is supposed to be helping financially with this?
It's an intergovernmental agreement based on the city of Aurora. I'm smiling at Mr. Rickard because I hope he'll jump in if I don't get the facts straight. But it's an intergovernmental agreement between the city of Aurora and the county of Kane, in which the city of Aurora is responsible for maintaining the wall, but we are responsible 50-50 for replacing the wall. The wall is getting old, it's falling down, it's requiring a lot, $15,000 to $20,000 of maintenance every year. The neighbors are begging and demanding a sound barrier wall, and there isn't because of this intergovernmental agreement that we are 50-50 responsible for replacing it. That's where Kane County is responsible. And the state of Illinois is also involved, and I believe I've been told that the money has been, it's in the budget, but not released from DCEO, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. And if you want me to make this any more complicated, that's as far as I can go. Mr. Rickard, I hand it to Mr. Rickard.
Do you have anything to add to that?
I think that Ms. Bates,
Ms. Bates, you got it.
Ms. Bates, you've handled it very well. I think just to add to it, it is something that the city of Aurora is working on, and hopefully we can figure out a way to have DCEO move it forward. It is, how do I say this? There are bonds that are associated with these funds, and those bonds are being released over time. And so I can also continue to follow up with the city, but I think what you're asking is an opportunity for our legislators to see if they will help us to see if the bond funds can be released sooner.
That sounds good.
So,
I think what I'm asking for, because our legislative committee is now the handshake with McGuire Woods, our lobbyist, that I'm trying to gather up some more steam here through the legislative committee to talk to our lobbyists, whom I'm told might be the key to this. And also the Senator Karina Villa, because the Senate has more to do with these agencies such as DCEO than the House. So I also sent her this email, and I sent it to the city of Aurora and the alderman. So I'm just throwing everybody in the pot and see what happens.
For the clerk and the chair, would you disambiguate DCEO?
Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.
Okay, so it's not the highway department, it's a separate, you know.
Yeah, it's a situation where Orchard Road is split as was mentioned 50-50 between the city and the county. It is a county highway, but it was done, the whole Orchard Road segment from Prairie Street to the north was a joint effort that the city and the county worked together on. And so because of that, we have this 50-50 split of the infrastructure costs and maintaining it. They do maintain this segment of roadway, the city does. And in this case, the fence needs to ultimately be replaced. There was some state funds that were allocated towards something potentially better than just a wooden fence. The only thing that legally is obligated is a wooden fence, but as was mentioned, that fence has come to a point where it needs replacement, and there's a good chance that the replacement with more of a concrete wall would be better and last longer. It's got about a 50-year lifespan. And so this funding that the state gave was a while ago, and the city continues to move the project forward, and hopefully we'll be able to have a better fence up there in short order, but it does take time. It's not unlike many of the roadway projects that take years and years to bring to fruition.
And yet this has been years and years and years and
Yes.
years. So I think what I'll do, Mr. Chairman. yes,
Go ahead, Nate.
the only person I didn't send this to is McGuire Woods. So with your permission, I will be forwarding this letter to Greg Bales. Oops.
Yeah, she had to go.
Okay. So
yeah,
I think, is that my next?
Make it clear to
Best
me,
move here.
do we need some folks to put pressure on DCEO, or is there actually a bill that should be submitted?
There's no bill that's needed. It's already part of the capital program. And there's a process in place where, again, when the bond funds are ready to be released, they will be released, and DCEO will contact the city and say, it's now time to start the process. I can't speak. There are literally thousands and thousands of projects that DCEO is dealing with.
But only one I'm working on. So.
And very well understood. I think with like even the Long Meadow monies that we're anticipating, it was only last week that we were given the approval to start the process for that, even though we've had the money for a while. And so it just takes time. And at the same time, I don't think there's any harm in trying to get some assistance from our legislators to say, where are these funds? Where are they in the process? Is there anything that the city needs to do to continue to have it move forward?
Thank you. And I would.
Yeah, Ms. Bateson, why don't you write up that letter, but submit it to us so that we can.
It's submitted. I
Let's-
wrote it on Saturday. I
Send
sent
to
it on
us.
Saturday.
Okay. I'll get back to you then on
Okay.
how to forward it to Greg.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been told by one legislator that he said, I don't understand this. You guys need a lobbyist. So I have the feeling the lobbyist is the one who needs to help the legislators understand this enough to.
And it felt good to have the senator who's sort of on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
Many of us to have said that our lobbyists are effective and that they're helping along. That
Maybe
felt
we,
good.
and Karina Villa, it's in Karina Villa's district. So I sent it to her too. I was busy.
On the other legislative priorities, and we've had some things from the Mr. Teppe's thing on the senior tax exemption. We've had some things from all over the place, and we're getting them organized into an organized group. And for next month's meeting, we're going to try to have us look at that list and prepare to forward it to the county board. Whether we forward it to the county board after next month's meeting, or if we have to deal with it, we'll see. But we're hopefully going to have that for you for next month's meeting. Basically, lobbyists need to know what it is we are most interested in. They also need to be telling us about bills that we should be interested in that we don't know about. There's some of
Two-way
that too.
street.
Pardon me?
It's a two-way
Two-way
street.
Yeah. We have no need for an executive session. I feel like I've talked enough in terms of co-chair comments. Is there any public comment? I don't see anybody online. I don't see any hands up. I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Bates moves.
Base moves adjournment.
Strathman seconds.
Strathman second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
You bye.